Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to stories that matter here on the North Fork of Long Island, and sometimes far beyond. Some of our guests are rooted here by generations, others join us from elsewhere to share their work, their perspective, or their connection to this community. It all brings something that resonates, something that adds to the ongoing conversation. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 161, we sit down with Tommy John Schiavoni, Assemblyman for the 1st District of New York State Assembly. Tommy John's family has called the East End home for generations, and his own journey began in Sag Harbor, where his upbringing and his family's plumbing and heating business shaped his early perspective. He went on to spend more than 30 years teaching social studies, helping young people understand history, government, civic responsibilities, before moving into public service at the local level on zoning boards, the school board, and the Southampton Town Council. In 2024, he was elected to the State Assembly, succeeding longtime Assemblyman Fred Thiele. Now representing the East End in Albany, he's working on issues ranging from environment protection and affordable housing to public transit and the recognition of the Montaukett Indian Nation. In our conversation, we'll talk about his family's roots, his career in education, the path that brought him into government, and what he sees as the biggest challenges and opportunities facing our community today. So I hope you enjoy episode 161 with Tommy John Schiavoni. This episode was recorded May 23rd, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Oh, Chris, you're welcome. It's an honor to be here today at the Floyd Memorial Library here in the village of Greenport.
Thank you. And so in the beginning, I usually just like people to give us a little introduction about themselves, where they were born and raised.
I'm from Sag Harbor. I was born there. I am a local there. My father, my grandfather, my mother, they were all born on the eastern end of Long Island, and we've made our life here for generations. And
in terms of your ancestry, how far back can you go, even on Long Island?
Well, my ancestry is Irish-Italian, and the Schiavonis actually came into the United States from Greenport.
Wow.
We had prearranged jobs at the brick factory here, and so came over from Italy a little over 100 years ago. So we are, relatively speaking, we are newcomers to the area compared to some of the families who are here. But at some point, our relatives, or on my side of the family, went down to Sag Harbor and opened up the Schiavoni's Market. That was where my father was raised, in the apartments over the store. And my grandfather left the market and opened up a plumbing and heating business. And I was raised in that plumbing and heating business.
Okay. And I think I remember even seeing on maps in Greenport, a Schiavoni Market on Main Street in Greenport. That must have been the same relatives.
There used to be a bowling alley, and
yes.
it was behind Robert's Quick Mart over there,
mm-hmm.
and that was one of my relatives, distant relatives, who had that store for a while. Don't know much about them because we were doing our thing down on the South Fork and Conic Bays. It's a natural barrier.
But your family's been involved with the Schiavoni Market in Sag Harbor since it opened.
Yes, it opened in 1931, and my grandfather and his brothers, Angelo and Vincent, opened the market and ran the market. A bit of a tragedy. In 1941, my uncle Vincent, during an air raid drill, right, during a blackout during World War II, he was going over to his station at the firehouse, which is right across the street, and was tragically hit by a car, and he was killed. And He left 3 boys, 3 young children, all under the age of 5. And it was real sad. And it was that event that my grandfather decided to go into plumbing. I'm not quite sure what the details were on that. And my uncle Angelo stayed with the store. And his sons, Joe and John, ran the store. And now my cousin Michael runs the store. And his sons are now involved. So it really is a 4-generation business over there. And they do a good job. Mm-hmm. It's a popular store.
And then so your father continued the plumbing business, and then you were involved.
I became a teacher. My
Yes.
brothers are involved in the plumbing business. They still run it. That business is still going.
Yes.
I went into education.
Okay.
Although I did work in the business my entire life.
Yes.
We kind of didn't have a choice. We went to work, and so I was in plumbing for 37 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And as a teacher, I became a teacher.
Yes.
Teachers, some of us get the summers off, but very often a lot of us end up working the summers. And that's what I did for most of my career.
Yes. And moving to you, I just was curious about your time growing up in Sag Harbor and what that was like as a child, or even into middle school or high school.
Sag Harbor it's a wonderful community. And when I was a little kid, we had factories in Sag Harbor. Bulova was still functioning. Grumman had a factory, and there were a number of small machine shops. And I didn't realize it then like I do now. But I thought every community had a fishing fleet, farming, and factories. And that's something that we had on the East End when I was growing up. So a lot of people in the community were artisans and mechanics, and also we had this interesting dichotomy of fishing and farming as well. And I was raised with kids whose parents were involved in all of those industries. Of course, things change, and Sag Harbor was part of that. It was really a magical place growing up. It was sparsely populated. I liked being out in the woods, and I used to go camping and hiking, and I was raised actually over the bridge in the village of North Haven. Okay. And I explored every inch of that peninsula as a kid. So, that kind of helped solidify the foundation in our natural environment that I work to preserve today as an elected official. And getting back to the plumbing business, one of the things that we would do in plumbing is to drill water wells. I've actually done this. I've worked on putting shallow wells in the ground, by hand. We had these weights, very old school technology that we would install these wells and get them working. But we also worked on submersible wells. So when I went to college and studied water supplies, and when I was studying for my master's and learning about Long Island's unconfined aquifer, when I studied under then Assembly member Steve Englebright, it was all a very natural fit for me, because I had worked, in the environment. I've walked the area, and I've also installed the mechanics of, what it takes for people to survive in residence out here on the eastern end of Long Island.
Yes. And then you said you went to Pearson High School.
I did.
You mentioned that you were going to be a teacher, but coming out of high school, did you know that at that point, or were you?
Not really. I can say coming out, I always enjoyed government, appreciated government, was interested in government. I was the kid that would watch the presidential conventions in the summertime. Republican and Democrat, would watch every night, had my candidates. And so I was always involved in that. And I decided that I wanted to study history. And that is why I became a teacher of history, social studies, and government. So that came after, high school.
Okay.
And I made that decision early and stuck with it.
Yes.
And it's worked out. It was really a wonderful profession. I'm a retired teacher. I have great appreciation for everyone who goes into education.
And you mentioned, it was probably over 3 decades of teaching in the classroom. What did you take away from teaching young people about government, history, and civic responsibility?
A number of things. The more I learn, the more I realize how much there is to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so being a teacher, you learn a lot. And, I always, I believe it's important for us to teach our form of democracy. I think we need to do a better job at that. And I'm saying that as a government teacher. Very often, if people don't understand something, they don't trust it, or, that could be one of the outcomes. So I believe that we need to do more in that field. Working with young people is fun and a challenge, but it's more fun than a challenge in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I always appreciated the young folks who really grabbed onto it and learned it and wanted to learn the functions of our government. As one of the things that we did was we would take kids down to Washington, D.C. And that was, besides the trips being fun, invariably there would be a group of students who would follow me around because they wanted to learn. And, just when you're moving between the two buildings, I could tell the kids who were, just gravitating because, they would ask questions about this building or that building and all that. So those things really were a lot of fun. And the fun part about it was an effective education moment. You can tell when it's working, that mm-hmm. the kids they're taking it in, and I've always found that to be very satisfying. And one of the most important things that I've ever done in my life is to teach young people about our government.
Absolutely. You also got involved with public service, and you began locally with roles on the zoning boards, the school board, and the Southampton Town Council. What compelled you to get involved at the local level?
My family heritage has always been to be part of the community. Mm-hmm. My parents did it. My brothers, my uncles, they were always on school boards, and it was just something that it was expected mm-hmm. to do. So that was ingrained in me very early. So I thought it was important to step up. And boards like the zoning boards are locally a big deal. And, you want people to take it seriously, to learn it, to understand the applications. And it's a quasi-judicial board. So, those rulings are going to affect people's lives and mm-hmm. livelihood and, their finances as well, and the community. So I always took it very seriously. And I would say that was from the legacy that of my family mm-hmm. being involved. My uncle was on the school board. Angelo, I mentioned him earlier. He had a long stint on the Sag Harbor school board. And, so I ran for school board, and that was a great experience. As a school board member, you're actually required to take classes on finance, on governance and finance. And a school district is a municipality. A lot of people don't realize this. A school is a single-purpose municipality. It's a municipal corporation, and we have elected officials. The school board, we have an executive, the superintendent, and it operates in our form of government. And so all of that worked very well for me. And education, I think it goes without saying, education is incredibly important. And in New York, it is, in my opinion, one of the best things that we do here. We do a good job educating our children. There's always work to do in that field, but it's important to, one, give back, and two, provide for a sound basic education. That's the words in our Constitution in the state for all of the kids in the state of New York. And for me, being on our local school board as a teacher, as a community member, was an important thing for me to do for the community.
Yes. And how did these early government positions inform your sense of what was possible and what was challenging in public service?
Well, they give you a well-rounded view of how local government works. before I was on the school board as a teacher, I would go to Albany to lobby for educational funding. And that to me was public service. I believe that, like I said earlier, that education is important, and having schools funded is important to deliver that education. We need the resources to get those things done. So working on the school board, working on the zoning board, I also was a trustee on the board in the village of North Haven. You get to see the various levels of government, the functions of each levels of government, and it's important to have not only a longitudinal view of our governance, but also a lateral view of how government works and what areas deliver what services. As I said earlier, that I think that we need to do a more comprehensive job teaching our form of government, because in the United States, in New York State, our government is quite beautiful. People in our society get a say in every level of government, which is quite unique on the world stage. So serving on local boards of education, serving on the zoning board, serving on a village board, that's a skill set and a knowledge base that is it's important for government officials. And frankly, it's serving me well in the position that I'm in now.
Yes. And in 2024, you were elected to the New York State Assembly, succeeding Fred Thiele. What motivated you to take that step, and what was the campaign experience like?
I was elected, and of the great honors in my life, next to marrying my wife, raising our children, and being a teacher, being elected by the people in the community is an incredible honor and an important responsibility. So, given my experience in government and my work with Assemblyman Thiele over the years, it seemed like a natural fit for me. And also, not just my local government experience, my experience as a teacher and lobbying in Albany for educational resources for our local schools all worked well. Now, Assemblyman Thiele was a very committed and knowledgeable and effective public servant, a mentor in my view. And so following him it's a challenge. But, he told me, he was like, don't try to be Fred Thiele. You be Tommy John Schiavoni, and you be you. And he tells a story about when he was elected, he actually followed John Behan, who was a decorated veteran, a disabled veteran, and someone who served in government. And before that, Perry Duryea, who was actually the Speaker of the New York State Assembly. So he was coming after some real powerhouses, and just like I am. And so I think those were good words you put your own stamp on this thing. Yes. And serve the people the way you are going to serve. So I appreciated that, but it's also, he has put some things in motion that I'm following through on. And that is the nature of government, right? We're all temporary in these positions, whether it's 12 years or 30 years. You put things in motion, and very often others are going to be picking that ball up and running with it. That's the case in the town of Southampton. There are some things that I was working on. Those are still happening now. And my successors are working on those projects. One of them, on the South Fork, we're trying to get more train service on the South Fork. Love to get more train service out here on the North Fork as well. So that's just one example of something that he has put in motion that we are currently working on. I tried to get him to run again. Because he was the chair of a local governments committee and had been there for 30 years. And seniority in the New York State Assembly is just like any other state legislature in the country it's important.
Yes. And just now that you're in Albany, what has surprised you most about the day-to-day work of being an assembly member?
Albany is it's a scene there in a good way. In the Capitol building, in the legislative office building, the amount of advocacy groups and lobbyists, it's significant, which would make sense with a $254 billion budget. There's going to be folks who are coming up to see you on a variety of issues. So there's always rallies, there are demonstrations, there are protests. And I think that was, I won't say surprising, but it's new for me. I come from Southampton Town Hall. We don't get too many of those at Southampton Town. But they're certainly up there in Albany, and it's all been very, very wonderful. And I'll say, as a social studies teacher, and as somebody who appreciates history, being in the same chamber as Al Smith, as Teddy Roosevelt, and Fred Thiele is, that to me it's awe inspiring. It's like I said earlier, it's an honor.
Definitely. Now, just looking so far with what you're doing, one of your first major initiatives was a bill authorizing a homestead exemption in Southampton. Can you explain that legislation and what you hope it achieves?
Sure. This came about in Southampton Town when I was a member of the Southampton Town Board. And in Southampton Town, we had a policy where we would reassess properties every year. And there were those folks in the town of Southampton whose tax bills would go up just because somebody bought the house next door for $3 million or, some large numbers. Mm-hmm. So somebody who had worked for New York Telephone and was retired living in their low ranch, their tax bill would go up significantly because the value of the neighborhood was going up. And that was a policy that we were doing in the town of Southampton. We have taken a pause on that, and they're taking a look at that. But the homestead tax exemption, we requested that from the state of New York. What it would do, it would give a $50,000 tax reduction for people whose primary residence was in the town of Southampton, and if they qualified for Basic Star, which means that they make $250,000 or less. So if you meet those two qualifications, you can get $50,000 off of your assessment, and therefore you get a break on some of your property taxes. Now, the town board of Southampton still needs to pass this in order for it to happen, which is, again, our structure of government. In the state, we pass the enabling legislation, and then the local governments would have to take it on and pass their own local law to support it. But the town did request it, and we got it through the state. It was the first piece of legislation that I had passed, and it was exciting because I actually worked on it as a councilman in the town of Southampton.
Yes. And you've also sponsored a bill to reinstate recognition of the Montaukett Indian Nation. What's the background of that issue, and why is that important to you?
It's important because the Montauketts are here. And about 100 years ago, 102 years ago, it was declared in the courts that they actually were extinct. And this was Benson versus Farrow, as in Bensonhurst Benson, the guy who developed Montauk. And, this was about land. It was about real estate. It was about, acquiring lands there. And I always thought that was unfair. I thought it was unjust. The Montauketts are part of the Sag Harbor community, as well as East Hampton and Montauk. And really, Montauketts are all throughout Long Island. It was a very large tribe, and I believe in the re-recognition of that tribe from New York State because, I know these folks. I went to school with them. I graduated, like they're friends of mine. And, to say that they're extinct is just an injustice. Now, this had been put forward for 7 years and was vetoed by two governors. And so putting this forward yet again, the message, at least, for me, is that this issue is not going away, just like the Montauketts are not going away. They're here. They should be recognized. They should be recognized as the entity that they are. So this is important to me for, on a number of levels. And I wouldn't want people to think that the Montauketts are just based in Montauk. Mm-hmm. And, that's not the case. They really are. They live all over Long Island. Their history is our history. And being from Sag Harbor, there was a number of Montauketts that actually served in the whaling industry. Mm-hmm. So they came, there's like other groups of people, Sag Harbor has always been a diverse place because of the whaling industry and other factors as well. So the Montauketts, and they came to work on those whaling ships and settled in Sag Harbor, and that's how I came to know and was raised with them.
Yes.
They were here. They were here on North America
yes.
for a longer time before the Italians came here and the Irish. I'm also Irish too.
And then I just wanted to go back to, because you mentioned public transit access is limited on both forks, but particularly on the North Fork, we're starting to see more congestion worsening. And I know a lot of people that they tend to drive to Ronkonkoma because the train service is limited out here. But are there any legislative or budgetary efforts that you're supporting to try to do that? Or is it you have to work with the MTA to get them to provide more money out here?
Yes, you have to work with the MTA. We're part of the Metropolitan Transit Authority coverage area out here on the East End. And so that's a long process. And I think it's promising that in Ronkonkoma, you mentioned Ronkonkoma, that they are building up the Ronkonkoma hub in connection with MacArthur Airport, because Ronkonkoma continues out to Riverhead, which continues out to Greenport. Mm-hmm. So that is a natural transportation link out here on the North Fork that I think can be developed and should be developed. I believe that the Riverhead train station is vastly underutilized. It's not in my district, but I know the area quite well. And I always thought that train station could be upgraded in a way that could serve the East End better. And also the link out here to Greenport is, that too. If we improve Riverhead, we would improve the link out to Greenport as well. I always thought that it was really very wonderful that you could live on Shelter Island Heights, take the ferry and get on the train and go into New York City if you time it right. But yes. You would have to time it right. But I believe in public transportation for a number of reasons. I think sustainability is one of them. Any opportunity to get out of our cars, I think is a good thing, and get people on these mass transit entities, and let's face it, we're near the biggest city in the world, or one of the greatest cities in the world with cultural links, and it would be nice to be able to go in and out of the city using the transportation link that we currently have.
Yeah,
and I can tell you on the South Fork, we don't have the highways that are up here on the North Fork, and by choice, by the way. There was the Sunrise Highway was supposed to go east, but now we have the traffic without the highway on the South Fork. And in order to get the project that we're currently working on, we had to get a line on the 5-year capital plan of the MTA, and that's something that I was working on with Assemblyman Thiele, and we got this project on the MTA 5-year capital plan, and we did that 2 years ago.
Yes,
it's on. and so what I did this year in this budget cycle, I really pushed for fully funding the MTA capital plan. Mm-hmm. So now that it's fully funded, we're hoping that upgrades to the Montauk branch between Spionk and Montauk will happen.
Okay.
So that's what it takes. It takes a number of years to get on these capital plans. This is how we do it. Mm-hmm. And everybody takes a good long look at it, and then the capital plans are instituted. Government gets criticized because they work slowly. And I'd like everyone to know that is by design. Mm-hmm. It's not by incompetence. It's by government employee. They actually do a very good job at what they do. But the idea is that, if we're going to spend millions of dollars on various projects, it has to be planned out, engineered, and then, the public gets their say, and we put some time there so that people know or should know that it's coming.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned even the environment, but environment protection and affordable housing are central to your platform. How do you see these two issues intersecting here on the East End?
In the First Assembly District, there are 25 school districts.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of those, except for two, every one of those school districts are bringing in more students than they're graduating. Yet our population is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can kind of see what's happening there. A lot of young families, people who would be putting students or children into the school districts, they're choosing not to live here. And I believe that segment of the population is an important segment of the population, and that we need to keep our young people here. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, we had winter rentals. We had this thing, there were summer rentals, winter rentals, mm-hmm. and you could pick up a cheap winter rental and, live from September to May and have your own place and then be a vagabond or whatever for the summertime.
Mm-hmm.
And it would work. And a lot of young people, myself included, stayed in the area because they had those housing opportunities. And I needed that because, it took me a while to save up money to buy something. And I believe that affordable community housing out here on the East End is imperative to keep our young people, if they choose, to keep our young people here in the community, volunteering in our ambulance and fire departments, and making their life here and sending
mm-hmm.
their kids to our school. Because healthy communities, in my opinion, are communities that have people of all age ranges,
mm-hmm.
From the entire human lifespan. I think we can do it. I
mm-hmm.
know that we can do it by putting, I like mixed housing in our commercial areas,
yes.
having apartments over businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I think that works well. It puts eyes on the street.
Mm-hmm.
It brings commerce into those business areas, because if there are people around, people want to come and shop and go to the restaurants or
mm-hmm.
whatever, because there's stuff going on. And I think that's low-hanging fruit. So I was happy that in this budget, the state of New York included $100 million for infrastructure to help make that a possibility. Very often, the health department in Suffolk County, I don't mean to call them out specifically, but there's a certain amount of effluent flow that each parcel can have,
mm-hmm.
and that would need to be dealt with if we were going to have apartments over stores.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that we need to do. And we have the technology to mitigate the nitrogen that comes out of having more apartments and more people here. And I think that we can do it in a way that benefits the community and maintains the look and feel of our communities.
Yes. And I think specifically on the North Fork, we've seen some changes even since COVID. It has gotten more expensive. We do see a population a senior population, and we've had a lot of younger people leave because they can't afford to stay here. But I think even in Greenport, it would be nice to see some of that more mixed-use development, because it is more of similar to Sag Harbor, a little more walkable compared to other parts of other towns. But I guess also, even with sea level rise and climate migration, do you see that reshaping the East End over the next 2 decades?
I do. We're a coastal community. We have
mm-hmm.
hundreds of miles of coastline in the First Assembly District, and we're seeing more severe storms, and we are being affected by sea level rise. I'm also a proponent of the Peconic Bays,
mm-hmm.
and I worked to get $750,000 for the Peconic Estuary Partnership in the budget. These are initiatives that we work on. The 5 towns around the Peconic Bays, they all share the same water body.
Mm-hmm.
So what one town does affects everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not gone. However, I think it's important to maintain it. Our eelgrass beds have died out, and the partnership is doing a real great job at reseeding, along with Cornell Cooperative, who is instrumental in this area. So the efforts of those two groups are incredibly important. I'll say personally, I would like to see scallops come back in the Peconic Bays in a way that, would make them more marketable. But we're gonna see, and we are already seeing the effects of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Things like road ends, and the ferries had to increase the ramps. They had to raise the level of their ramps for to get on and off of the ferry because of these extreme weather events. And that's just like one small example, but it's going to cost a lot of money. And the state needs to be involved in this. The federal government needs to be involved in this, mm-hmm. because we have to, for example, we have to re-engineer our roads to take stronger storms. Currently, mm-hmm. our roads are engineered to handle 2 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. We're seeing 2 inches of rain in an afternoon sometimes. And mm-hmm. so that is just one example of how, we're shifting. And a lot of the local governments are making that change on their own. So that's something that needs to be done on the state level. And of course, when you're talking about re-engineering roads and drainage, mm-hmm. That's dollars, that's millions of dollars. And so it does affect us. I think there seems to be a sense that climate change is that's something that's pie in the sky or off in the distance, and it's not. It's here, and it's here now, and it's costing us a lot of money and affecting where we live. Yes. Tick-borne illnesses are being researched as an effect of climate change.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
we're seeing new species, and of course,
yes.
the southern pine beetle, is damaging our pine barrens.
Mm-hmm. Because when I talk to people that grew up here, even in the 50s or 60s, they said they wouldn't have to worry about tick-borne illnesses at that time. People could, and even going up into Maine now, it's affecting up there.
Yeah. Growing up here, we had Rocky Mountain spotted fever.
Oh, okay.
I actually contracted it as a child. It was bad. And but we didn't have the list that the starry babesiosis.
That has grown.
Every member of my family has been affected by this, and I'm just one family in one place in the South Fork. So it affects us, not only our quality of life. Tick-borne illnesses affects our quality of life, but it strains our healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
These are systemic changes, and not saying it's all about the money, but sometimes it's about the money, and and so it's important to quantify things like that with folks who question climate change,
mm-hmm.
Because it is real and it is happening, and it's going to cost.
Yes.
It's going to cost the state and the federal government. We see what's happening there currently. The federal government is pulling back programs, and
mm-hmm.
So they seem to be leaving the field as far as, helping with funding. So it's going to be left to the states and the local mm-hmm. governments to handle these things.
And then I was curious, just in terms for District 1, working within Albany, I've talked to former Assemblyman Thiele, and just in terms of getting money, providing money out here, and people tend to think more New York City centric, and if you're talking with people from upstate New York, they're like, well, you're all wealthy out there. So how has that been, even just talking and trying to say, no, we need funding out here and to provide for our community?
Yeah, I've been making that pitch this whole year, and you're correct in that a lot of the representatives in Albany come from New York City. Mm-hmm. And I think most of our conference comes from New York City, and for good reason. I mean, it's a city of 9 million people, mm-hmm. But it's important for us to get the funding that we need out here, and to work with my colleagues in the assembly to support some of their things, and some of they would support some of our things out here. I find that we have a lot of. Out here on the eastern Long Island, we have a lot of similarities with some of the suburban areas upstate, outside Rochester and Syracuse and Buffalo, and along the Hudson Valley, there are people in the majority who represent those areas whose their communities are very similar to this community. Some mix of affluence and local with how that is. So I've been working with those assembly members as well. We know this, and we're working together. In as much as we have a difference in parties in Albany, but there's also the difference between New York City and not New York City. So I know who my colleagues are in Westchester and Rockland and outside of Albany and Schenectady area, and also moving along to the west there. And that's an important exercise for a representative to do, is to know my colleagues' districts and kind of align what we need here along with what they need there. And, very often they're the same. And so we're pushing things to get things done.
Yes.
We've increased our funding in the first assembly district for schools. I'm proud of that. In years past, we've been looking at flat numbers as far as school funding. And this year we got about 2.5% increase in the first assembly district, and that's a good thing, and we need to continue that. Schools are providing much more than just education. There's social services. They're the first point of contact in many ways, for our community. So that takes resources.
Absolutely. And I know we've been talking about a lot of challenges or things you want to work on, but what do you see as the biggest challenge facing your district today, and what kind of long-term planning do you believe is necessary?
We mentioned housing earlier, and
yes.
I believe that is
Housing.
that is incredibly important out here on the East End. There are many ways to address housing. I'm very proud that the community supported the public referendum for the 0.5% transfer tax to support housing. And, so now the towns actually have tools to use. I was part of that effort to get that passed. And, the towns now can help individuals and businesses provide housing in an appropriate manner to have our young people stay here. That to me is very important. I was talking to a young lady, she's 25, and she was telling me that, she wants her friends to come back. They all moved away. She's from Hampton Bays. And so that is one thing. I also believe strongly in preserving open space and preserving farmland as well, and maintaining our fisheries. These are our legacy industries out here on the East End, and they're important to keep here. So I am on the Ag and Markets Committee in Albany by request. So, keeping those industries here as well, and really helping our environment and making sure that our waters, stay clean. I was happy to see that. I saw on Facebook I'm on Facebook, I shouldn't, but I do. And one of my friends who was raised here, he said that he saw the biggest school of blues and bass break in the water in the Peconic Bays that he's ever seen in his life. And I just, that's anecdotal, but I think that's a good sign. Yes. So, we're going to be working on that and continuing to work on that. I believe that public access to beaches are incredibly important out here, and I'm working on some bills in the assembly to maintain that. And also our water supply. People overlook that. We have no viable alternative on Long Island for water other than the aquifer that we have underneath us. So keeping that clean, and there are some challenges there. I was a former commissioner of the Hampton Bays Water District and a plumber, as you know. So this is important, and it really is life. I mean, we couldn't live here without the aquifer underneath us. So we are going to need funding and resources to put in filters to clean our water. We've PFAS and PFOAs, these emerging chemicals, they seem to be ubiquitous in the environment, and we're just learning in this past half a decade how prevalent they are. The good news on that front is that granularly activated carbon filters do a very good job at taking it out, PFAS out of the water. And, so we're going to be needing more infrastructure, which, is resources. Again, it's not about the money, but sometimes it's about the money. We need these things. So these are some of my top priorities as a member of the Assembly representing Eastern Long Island.
Yes. And I guess lastly, question, what continues to inspire you to serve, and what legacy do you hope to leave both in government and in your community?
Meeting with the constituents of the 1st Assembly District, I find to be inspiring. Talking to them, their lives, how they are living out here on the East End. I get a lot of energy from them and that. And it's God's country out here. And we want to maintain that. So you asked me earlier about campaigning, and one of the great parts of campaigning and being a public official is that you get to meet the people in your community. I know that that sounds, like, of course, but it really is. I get energy from it and from them. And, the basic concept of leaving a place better than when you found it, has been one of my life's mottos. I used to be a Boy Scout, and that was one of the sayings in scouting. You always leave the place better than how you found it. So that is kind of one of my rules in government and life, frankly, to the best of my ability. That is what I want to do.
Yes. And then I think just lastly, I usually ask people if there was any other things you'd like to discuss or say that we haven't talked about or covered.
It's a pretty comprehensive conversation, I think. But, I just want to say that being from the East End and my history from the East End, I'm proud of it. And I want and I know that others are proud of that as well. And I think that's important. I mentioned my family, on the Italian side, we came into Greenport and with jobs at the brick factory. But my grandmother, my Irish grandmother, she came to New York again about 100 years ago by herself. And she got a job as a maid in New York City, a domestic, as the Irish girls were called. And that's how she came out to Eastern Long Island. She got a job with a wealthy family in East Hampton, the Wainwrights. And she got to the level of cook, which was the top position in these houses. And so she helped raise the kids and stuff. And one of those children was our congressman from Eastern Long Island. His name was Stuyvesant Wainwright. And he was congressman out here for 10 years. And I just am incredibly proud that the grandson of that girl who came to New York by herself is now sitting in the New York State Assembly. And I think of that when I talk to young people and, folks out here, is that they are going to be in these positions. And, these are people who are from here or new arrivals here. It's all part of our social fabric out here. And, I'm proud to be a product of that.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that too, because I think we had only talked about your Italian side. So, and that's important because I think we have seen, I've talked with other people, and I think there has been a lot of Irish women that have come out here and supported a lot of families or made the households work at that time. So that was important. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story and all the work you're doing, and even excited to possibly have you back on to talk about more things that you're doing for our community.
Well, I look forward to it, and thank you for having me on. I've enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 161 with Tommy John Schiavoni. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.